Hello everybody and welcome to the 53rd edition of the Frank and Stan chat, and as you can see we have a guest this week. So we have Sam. Hello Sam.
Hi everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us, and as you can see we've got the usual suspect with us. Sam, how are you doing? Stan, sorry.
Changed my name already. That didn't take long.
It was the Sam and Stan show now.
Yeah, I think there's a cartoon like that. Yeah, I'm good. I'm not going to bring up care homes but that's the thing that's on my mind at the moment, because I didn't understand, and I'm sure many people don't, the actual cost of having your parent go into a care home. It is unbelievable. But hey, that's not for this conversation.
But I'm not going to be political, but actually there was a plan announced about.
I know there was a plan.
I think it was nearly 2 years ago, and
I think
the plan's not been delivered, or at least published.
What must have happened is the Queen must have missed that paragraph when she was reading it through.
You've got it.
That's what's happened. So I forgive her for that.
Well, it's Sam. How are you today?
Good, thank you. It's Friday.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming this week. It's been one of those
busy
weeks
week for you, I believe. So
very busy. Yeah.
Can you just tell everybody who you are and how you know Stan, I suppose?
So Stan and I go back a long way. So who I am is I'm Professor Sam Twiselton. My current day job is at Sheffield Hallam University, where I'm the director of Sheffield Institute of Education. Stan and I first met, could be 10 years ago now, maybe more.
But it's more than that.
Yeah, I think it probably is. We go back a long way, and I'm so brilliant to meet up with you again, Stan. So I was working at University of Cumbria when we first met, and we went on quite a journey together, Stan, didn't we, in terms of GTP into SCIT and school-led and all of that, and it was great working with you. I just loved it. Yeah. So it's fantastic to be working with you again today.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay,
and we did the NQT stuff as well, didn't we?
That's right, we did. Yeah.
So Sam, what we do, the first thing we do is what's caught your eye this week, but we'll go to Stan first. So what's caught your eye this week then, Stan?
Well, today, and I've only realised this today because somebody's reminding me, is the anniversary of Robert Owen, who you might not know anything about, or you might know a lot about.
I know a lot about, I know.
Robert Owen, it's 250, it would have been his 250th birthday today. It's 250 years. But the thing that he gave us that I think is remarkable for that time is the 8-hour day. So his philosophy was 8 hours of labour, 8 hours of recreation, and 8 hours of rest. And just a fabulous, simple thing.
Yeah, if only life was as simple as that. It's great.
He also believed that the community should benefit from the work of those in the community. Which again...
And of course, the cooperative movement, of which, because I was the CEO of the Co-op Academies Trust, Robert Owen oozes through the history of the cooperative movement.
Absolutely.
So, it's
happy birthday to Robert Owen.
Well, happy birthday to Robert. What's caught my eye this week? Well, something's doing my head in at the moment, and it's actually there are a flurry of Ofsted reports about various subjects coming out, all of which tell me absolutely nothing that I didn't know or could guess already. So one, for example, came out about TAs, teaching assistants, and how they are best to support children with special educational needs. And guess what? One of the recommendations, strongest one, was that it works better if they have strong subject knowledge. I mean, I tell you what, I mean, that's a real humdinger, that one. I don't know where they picked that one from, but I mean, you wouldn't have needed to visit any school to come up with that one. So it's the flurry of Ofsted reports, whereby they're primarily probably trying to justify why they exist, or trying to find another purpose for their work other than inspecting schools. So that's what's caught my eye. What's caught your eye this week, Sam?
Well, not so much caught my eye as being right in my face is the ITT meetings I've been in, but I think we'll come back to those. So I'll park those for a minute. The best thing about this week for me is actually going into a school for the first time since the first lockdown. So I went into a primary school yesterday, and it was just brilliant. the kids were amazing, the staff were amazing. Some chickens hatched in front of my eyes in the incubator in reception. And it was just, it gives you hope that, obviously it wasn't normal. They were coping very well with having to sort of do things differently. It wasn't normal, but it feels like, could one day we be getting back to normal? And it was just being in a room with people, especially children, especially primary kids. It was amazing.
I can remember doing an inspection where the school had arranged for all these chicks to be born on the day of the inspection.
I wonder if they'd done that for me. That'll be it. They've definitely done it, especially for me.
Yeah. And then I pointed out that, because I said, well, what happens next to them? And they said, oh, we'll return them. And I said, well, actually, you can't.
Didn't quite work like that, sadly.
Yeah. Very happy first day, but
yeah.
Oh, well, Sam, you were mentioning about a bit of a tough week. At least nice to have visited a primary school. But actually, I think you're one of the reviewers of the, I don't know if it's actually called the ITT Market Review. That sounds very commercial, but is that what it's actually officially called?
It is, yeah. That's its official title.
Those of us who are not in your world, a little bit of a summary as to what that's all about.
Yeah, so actually the review itself first started many years ago. It's had various titles, but I think Market has been in there in one form or another for quite some time. And it really goes back to really the very early days of the coalition government and some big changes to teacher training that kind of came in on the back of the importance of teaching white paper. So those of us who do live in this world will remember very well, it kind of heralded, it was Michael Gove, who was Secretary of State at the time, a big change to teacher training in terms of trying to get much more of it, ideally all of it, to be honest, into schools. Yeah. And many things happened on the back of that policy. One of which was the thing called School Direct, which meant that already kind of accredited providers of initial teacher training could work with schools, and schools could be more in the driving seat in terms of getting more of the money and doing more of the training. And that was always seen. That came in, I think, was it 2011?
Yeah.
12, maybe?
Yeah, 11, 12, somewhere.
Yeah. And at the time, I think everybody, including sort of DfE officials, always saw it as just a stepping stone to something more permanent and bigger. And yet we still have that as one of the sort of major planks of ITT now. So how I first became aware of whatever version of it was called back then was back in 2014, when I was on the advisory panel for the Carter Review of Initial Teacher Training, which is again all part of the same raft of reforms, really. And at that point, they were kicking it off, and they were just talking to various people about what could work as a more sort of robust, less fragile form of increasing school-led teacher training than School Direct. And then so I got involved in a couple of meetings then. As I say, that's back in 2014. It seemed to have stopped and started several times. They restarted a little bit pre-pandemic, but again, it was just talking to people in fairly vague terms. And then I was contacted in the summer during lockdown to say they were properly starting it again now, and there was a lot of ministerial interest in it. So the form it was going to take was probably a bit bigger in terms of implications than the original conversations that I'd been involved in previously. And as you say, it's called a market reform. And what's becoming more apparent, but I'm still not sure where we're actually going to land with it, is certainly some people in the government, I wouldn't say there's completely unanimous agreement on this, want to see the ITT sector reshaped as a result of this review. And that can take lots of different forms. So the
reshaping doesn't necessarily mean sort of condensing it into smaller or larger individual providers.
That's one possibility, and that is certainly a fear that many providers have, and that's what we've been meeting with loads of different groups of stakeholders this week. It's been great, actually. I said it's been hard, but that's because it's been so intense.
Yes.
And that's definitely a big fear that's come through, actually, from providers of every size. I think we're the second biggest at Sheffield Hallam. We're worried about it, but then you'll take a very small skit that will also be very worried about it, because they will feel very threatened. that if that is the outcome. Now, the chair of the group, the advisory group that I sit on, a guy called Ian Borkham, who's also the chair of the Ofqual board, has said several times in these meetings that there's no predetermined size and there's no predetermined number.
Right.
So it's not a done deal that will be a small number of very large providers. But he's also been pretty clear that he would feel like the review has not done what it's being asked to do if there aren't differences to the subject providers at the end of this process. So where we are at this point, it feels a little bit murky, if I'm honest. Mm-hmm. There are things I'm excited about and think could have a really positive impact. I think my role on the group has been mainly to really push some of what I found, particularly when I was on the Carter review of initial teacher training, but also just, the many years I've been involved in teacher training. A lot of the work we did together, Stan, has informed my sort of thinking on this, which is, if you were to say that there's a problem with initial teacher training, and obviously most of the providers that we spoke to this week don't think there is, and I understand why. But I do, speaking as a provider, I think there is a problem, but it's not because the providers aren't working really hard and trying their very best to do the best they can to train teachers. But rightly, so much of teacher training depends on school, on what happens in schools in terms of how their practice is developed, how it's supported, how it's challenged, etc. And that is the bit of the system that is the most fragile. At its best, it can be absolutely brilliant. And, Stan, you and I can think of some really great examples from the past, where you get great schools who are really, really invested, spend a lot of their time and energy getting their head around what their role in it is, really work hard to support those trainees, really understand that they have different needs at different points and so on. And that's what, for me, that's the thing that will make a really good teacher training course. Yes, it matters what they get in their curriculum, and it matters what they get in the sort of centre-based bits of training, whether it's in a lecture theatre or in a school training room. But the most powerful bit will be what happens in school. So we have come up with a sort of a set of what we've called programme elements, which include much more of a focus on that school-based bit with a view to try and control those variables a little bit more.
Right.
By doing things like one of the proposals is that courses should have some form of intensive placement. So that would be a fairly short placement where quite a number of trainees would go into a smaller number of schools.
Right.
Meaning that the schools can kind of release really good mentors to spend much more carefully kind of planned time than you can do when you're trying to do it on the top of a day job. That's one of the proposals. So things like that, actually, we've been discussing through these meetings this week, and most people think they're a good idea, but not sure if it's realistic that the sector can deliver them. And I have worries about that. Right. Because what we're talking about is quite disruptive for schools. Ideally, from my point of view, it would happen in the autumn term. Well, they've got lots of other things going on in the autumn term. It's not easy to just release somebody from a timetable for a period of however many weeks these placements are to do the kind of support that would be needed. So I get all the reasons why it might not work, but if we could make it work, it would improve things.
My concern is, even way back when we were on things like the graduate teacher, was that there was a risk that we were preparing teachers to work in a particular school.
Absolutely.
And not preparing teachers to be able to teach in any school.
Yeah.
And I still, to some extent, have those concerns.
Yeah.
There's a couple of schools locally who provide ITT. And I don't know the program. I've not got into program, but I've still got this feeling that they are growing their own, if you like. And growing staff for them or very similar schools, but not. And I know from my time doing NQTs, there are sometimes people who fit into one school who just do not fit into another, where careers could have ended if we'd not been able to intervene and say, actually, we found another school that's willing to take you on, and people have blossomed in those circumstances.
I absolutely, totally agree, Stan. And actually, the ability to compare and contrast different schools, the two sort of standout things that are often very different between one school and another are their approach to behaviour and their approach to the curriculum. and it's really beneficial. We have schools in our partnership who take sort of polar opposite approaches to those two things. And it really opens the trainees' eyes to even just a day in one of those schools is enough to get them to see, oh, there's more than one way of thinking about this. And that brings that sort of critical reflection that is so important. As a teacher, you've got to be able to critique what's in front of you, haven't you?
Yeah.
And like you say, make choices that are personal to you in terms of the kind of school that you want to work in, but also choices in terms of what's likely to be effective and what isn't, in terms of supporting the children that you're responsible for's learning.
It's really interesting because I hadn't thought about it, but I won't tell you who it is, obviously, but somebody who went through the Teach First program is now sort of like 5 years into their career and is really struggling, not with the teaching, but actually not being aware of what other schools are like. And so she's now thinking about applying for another school in another part of the town. But actually I'm just saying, we'll do it. But obviously my experience is much broader. And even when I started teaching, I'd already had, I think it's 4 or 5 placements over those 6 years. Yeah. Whereas for her, she's had that single placement in that one school. They've kept her. And she's now uncertain about what does the world look like outside of this one institution.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the government has a responsibility, I think, to train teachers for the system, not for a school, not for a mat. Now, there are definitely some benefits of learning one way of doing things really well. Yeah. So I can see some benefits of that, but you have to have the alternatives. You have to have that broader sort of angle. Perspective and things.
Is there an issue though with the mats developing their own? Is that, there's a view that there's the government preferred approach, and so in effect, it's because of that. I'm not suggesting there is, but but there is a suggestion that there is. That means that those mats are the favoured ones. So if ever there was some sort of competition or market, there would be a sense that these would be favoured to the point that they would survive. The system would flex sufficiently to enable them to continue, because that's the lever that government can use to get what they want and to have a vanguard, shall we say, doing it their way. So is that an underlying fear in the
definitely system? A fear, yeah. I would say that's definitely come through quite strongly in the discussions. And it's quite hard for me to genuinely know the extent to which that is founded. I do know the discussions that we've had in the group. I think we've been fairly clear, and I think Ian has been clear as a chair that we don't think there is one model, and that actually trainees do need exposure to different models. We do think, though, there's something about coherence. There's a fine line between that ability to compare, contrast, critique, and see there are choices in different evidence bases, and ending up, particularly when you think that postgraduate teacher training is just so short, with just a real mishmash of bits and pieces of knowledge and experience that you can't put together and do anything with in terms of developing your own skill as a practitioner. So one of the things that we have been keen to do is to work on what can bring coherence to the sort of trainee journey through their ITT. But that does not mean conformity. That does not mean that there's one model, there's one sort of formula, because learning's just not like that. It's not like that for teachers, it's not like that for pupils. So we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought that was going to improve teacher training, because it won't do. At least that's my view. And
how did you feel about taking the role on in the first place? It probably wasn't going to be, in some quarters, not the most popular role. How did you feel about the approach, and what was going through your mind when you considered taking it on?
They knew when they asked me it was quite a big decision, and they gave me some time to sort of come back to them with an answer. And one of the first things I needed to do was talk to my own institution, because there are a number of factors to consider. There's a worry in terms of being associated with something that actually might not work and might have a detrimental. That's my biggest worry, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
might have a detrimental impact on initial teacher training. And obviously there's an institutional version of that. I work in a university that's very committed to teacher training, and I don't want to be the person who's responsible for it having to withdraw itself from teacher training or whatever. So there's lots of reputational risks, and I've been through this a bit before. So I had to go into it with my eyes wide open. The conversations I had internally were very helpful, because I think the track record I've had of being on these things is it is better to be on the inside and shaping things, and to have somebody who does know the sector involved, and working with really good civil servants who don't want to wreck the system. That has been my experience so far. That being on the inside, shaping it, having a positive impact. That's what we're looking for, but I'm still very worried about it, because if you're going to fundamentally remodel how things are done, that's going to definitely bring lots of risks. And in a post-pandemic phase, when everybody's still sort of kind of pulling themselves up off the ground after what we've been through, it feels even more risky. But I can also understand the perspective from the government that actually, COVID has shone a light on the importance of education and the importance of teachers within education, and therefore, we need to do everything we can to make sure that we're giving them the best start. So I think they're coming from a good place. Where we end up, we will see.
I'm assuming retention's an issue as well, is it?
Yeah.
Because at the moment the figures are not good, are they, for retention?
No. Yeah, and I suppose all my work in recent years, certainly since being on the Carter Review, has linked to teacher retention more than teacher training in many ways. And one of I'm not here to be a proponent for the government, but one of the good things that the government has done is, I think, in recent years, taken teacher retention seriously, because it recognised why there was a problem with teacher recruitment was because we weren't holding on to the teachers that we got. So you're kind of like refilling a leaky bucket all the time. And obviously multiple reasons why teachers are leaving, but that getting the best start in terms of initial teacher training, and then what happens in their early career phase is a really important part of that. We all know that. And I do, you might not agree with all the detail of everything that they've done about that, but what you can't say is they haven't taken it seriously. So the early career framework and the changes there, are at least recognising early career teachers need support, and they're not the fully formed product, and therefore some of the really unrealistic expectations that have sometimes been placed on them are why they've stressed and overworked, and therefore likely to leave. So yeah, teacher retention, to be honest, it's the biggest reason, and that's not just because it's wasteful to be training teachers who then leave. It's also the longer you stay, the better you get. The pupils get a better deal, don't they, if they've got more experienced teachers?
I just think back to that graduate teacher programme where we were on something like 95% after 3 years.
I know, yeah.
Because there were people who'd had previous jobs.
Absolutely.
And made a decision to change it. And I know there's some work being done. Is it in Hastings, around that area, to do something similar, where it's actually a paid training, as opposed to paying £9,000 when to encourage people into teaching who've chosen a previous career and then want a career change. I think you've got to put some money into covering their costs.
And we've got some stunningly good people through that route, because they're so invested. Like you say, it's a big deal. If you've got a mortgage and kids and all those other commitments to worry about, you're not going to just go into it half-heartedly, are you? You're going to really, you're going to be very committed. And also, we got so many people applying that you could make sure that only the really kind of robust ones got through. So yeah, it's a shame that we don't have more of that now. I agree.
I believe it or not, we've nearly had half an hour.
God.
Can I just throw a short little comment from you, Sam? Academic Freedom Bill. Do you see that as a, where do you sit with that in terms of your concerns or your encouragement for it?
I mean, in what context? There's obviously a big national conversation going on about universities and academic freedom at the moment. Is that what you're talking about?
It is, really.
Or are you talking about, because it's come up a lot actually in the initial teacher training meetings as well. So I feel more confident talking about the latter than the former.
That's fine. I mean, it was really just something that has because of the Queen's speech on Tuesday, people are trying to. Oliver Dowden was interviewed, trying to explain what probably at the moment in his head is quite a sort of flaky view as to where this is all heading. So and I think that's coming through from a couple of other ministers as well. And actually, there's a bit of a mixed picture in terms of how they're interpreting it. So it's probably best that we leave it.
Yeah, I might get myself into deep waters through ignorance.
No, that's fine. Okay, so it's fascinating. Thank you so much. Yeah. I did say before we recorded, I said to you, Sam, did it feel a little bit like a poison chalice? But actually, I think what you've done here is describe, the situation really, where it's probably better to have somebody who's very well informed and well known within the sector engaging in that sort of work, because if you don't take it on, then somebody else will be asked. And actually, it's not arrogance, I don't think, but actually you do feel, if asked, I prefer to be in there trying to influence it rather than on the outside,
Yeah.
Well, have you forgotten that Michael Gove instinctively knows what the right answer is?
And he certainly doesn't believe in experts either. Do you remember that? Oh dear.
But he said about initial teacher training, I instinctively know this is better.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, Sam, thank you so much for ending your week with us.
I believe it was so quick. I thought we were still on the warm up.
No, it's amazing. I mean, when the report is published, we'd love to have you back.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Can we hold you to that? Because I think I have to say this whole thing around ITT is just there is a body of people out there that just really want to have a voice on this, and we're not the vehicle for that. But I think it would be interesting to know, when you get to the end of it, what some of those challenges and the stress and strain of making these decisions. I think I'd be interested to know, how you resolve those.
Yeah. Can I say something off the record now?
Well, you're still being recorded, but
you can take it out.
I'll just. Okay, well, thank you, Sam, for giving us your time, and I wish you all the best with this, very important work you're engaged in. And Stan, we have a guest, Max Pescatori, is on next week, who's going to talk about Montessori education, because we've been very keen to sort of get involved in that sort of side of things. We've tended to be a bit leadership and management and very strategic, I think. So anyway, we're looking forward to Max joining us next week. So thank you everybody for watching, and hope you have a good week. So thank you very much, Sam. See you soon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.